The Deep Dive presents the Fifth Year Option NFL Draft Podcast with Andy Molitor and Vegas Refund, powered by BetSperts.
Hey, what's up? Sorry, I was typing a note because draft intel never sleeps, especially 14 days out. Shit kind of snuck up on it. It feels like the whole time we've been talking about it's a long time till the draft. It's like anything else. Shit just sneaks up on you. We're 14 days out. We have a guest coming in for the second half. That's going to be a lot of fun. And there's been a lot of, I hesitate to call it news because not everything you hear can be qualified as news right now. I think that's maybe one of the biggest takeaways for the whole week for me is not everything's actionable, not everything's true, not everything is sourced, and a lot of people are still just bullshitting their way through this. But I don't know. What do you think the biggest one of the week was? I feel like maybe the Houston doesn't take a quarterback ripple effect that's probably been the biggest one that busted the market up, besides just the obvious of the big movement on the first overall pick being towards Bryce.
Yeah, we are at peak. I can't remember the amount of angles and narratives that are going on around this time, which usually it's like you're honing in on one narrative where it feels like we have 100 currently. But yeah, definitely the passing on a QB at 2 is probably the one that I'm paying attention to the most, where it's gotten to a point where it feels like it might be talked about a little bit too much. Where like when you see Schefter on ESPN talking about it, it kind of, I don't know if we've exceeded levels of belief, or it might just be smoke, who knows. But if I'm making a mock right now, I'm probably putting Anderson number 2, to be honest.
Yeah, it kind of jumped the shark a little. And I agree with you there. I am working on a new mock and I do have Anderson number 2, but also because I took some Anderson, and I think a lot of people did this because you saw the movement in the market on, second overall pick, top defensive player taken. But there was some smoke, fire, news, rumors around it being Tyree. And you saw that number come down a lot. And I had to take that, obviously. I was able to get a half decent chunk on just Anderson top overall defensive player right during the Jalen fallout, which seems like it was a year ago at this point. So I was able to get a pretty sweet price on that. And then all the Tyree stuff came out. There was a couple of reports saying they had looked at him at number 2, possibly. And D'Amico likes him. The front office likes him. And there were some big enough numbers there. It's like, well, I kind of have to hedge this at this point and take this. And it's funny too. And you could still end up getting Anderson top defensive player if we don't get a defensive player at second. I don't know. Give me your percentage right now. Let's say nothing changes. Let me lay it out. It's Bryce is drafted first. The Texans have not and will not trade out of the second spot. Everything else is there. Give me your percentage of they take a quarterback, any quarterback, literally any of the 3, or they go defense at all. Like 50-50, or is it less?
Legit 50-50. Like it is the safe. It's like, that's just where we're at, because which the Tyree news really was sparked by like the Zerline mock a couple weeks ago. But I think like the scenario that like I guess you could say laying out in my head is like something like Bryce, Anderson, and then something where like the Colts trade with the Cardinals because they want Stroud at 3. And then the Cardinals take someone like Tyree or Anderson. And then the 2 quarterbacks start falling, let's just say. And that's when the rumors of the Texans using the 12th pick to trade back up for, who we've heard, Levis, definitely comes into play. I know Levis is the favorite for the Colts, but I don't know how much that's factoring in Stroud being there. And then at the same time, like these odds flipping from Stroud to Bryce, it does feel like everything's just like piling on Stroud right now, where last week or 2 weeks ago, we had a certainty at a minus 200 level, even though that probably wasn't fair. Like we were saying, don't bet it on Stroud. And now all of a sudden, it's just crazy how quick the narrative can switch, where all of a sudden Stroud's falling 3-4, who knows? And it wasn't too long ago, which I'm definitely interested to see Norris's mock later today.
Yeah, that's out later today for sure. And it does feel like we're kind of at that weird same spot that we were right around the combine, where everybody knows what Bryce is. Everyone is excited about the athleticism, the upside, the peak, the ceiling of a Rich. Levis is still a bit of a sweetheart because of his, I don't know, like his physique, his build, his size. Like he is just built like, your atypical, prototypical quarterback that succeeded over the last couple decades or even longer. And we have Stroud again that just, I bitched about this during the combine. I'm like, are we just not talking about Stroud? And, there has been rumors, not even just rumors. There's still, there's reports, there's straight up reports saying like, this has been a thing where it's easy for these Ohio State quarterbacks because they have like 9 5-star receivers. Obviously, the receiving room at the Ohio State University is like elite last year, and that can temper things. So I don't know if that's actually true, the comparisons to field. How are you feeling about that as far as like how your temperature and how teams think about Stroud right now?
Well, I do want to like the value isn't like in terms of like the top 5 picks, like or like top 4 or whatever, like betting to that pick isn't where the value is. They're like if the numbers that have value still that haven't been bled out are betting picks that are the ripple effect of what you think. Yeah. So like if you think Stroud is going 1, Bryce is a better bet to bet number 2. If you think Anderson's going 2, betting Stroud at 3 or 4 is a better bet than
probably 3 and 4.
Yeah. So yeah, like the ripple effect is what you want to look at instead of like the actual event. Where DraftKings says all the way up to pick 10 now, which I think a lot of them got crushed early. Where like I think Falcons opened up like Van Ness like 40-1, and now it's like 3-1. But hopefully we'll get some more of those.
Yeah, you did see a lot of that. And I think that's the move. And like you just said, the things that got crushed, I think the move is to take some of that edge case variance on big numbers. Like all it takes is something that seems sort of likely. Like, hey, here's like the 9 different ways that the trade could go with the Cardinals. And if it goes this way and the quarterbacks go this way, 1-2, or it goes quarterback, defensive player, and then there's a trade. What happens at 4, 5, 6? What happens at 7, 8? What's happening? And then looking at some of those big numbers, I think that's where some of that stuff got picked off. And you're right. If you think X happens, it's kind of an if-then problem. If we go defensive player at 2, then what presents value at number 3 based on a trade? Honestly, exactly. If it's defensive player at 2, you got to feel like Arizona is scrambling at that point. And if they keep it close to the chest, I know this is fun from like people who just like to take in the combine, the draft, and love the NFL and love the drama. And it would be nightmare for gambling is like Arizona trades during the draft, because it's there's not very many live markets up. You can't do much at that point.
Yeah, and I think
you could be positioned, ahead of time, saying like, if it happens, it happens, and this happens, and maybe I have some value on some big numbers on some players, but it'll be piss poor for me if Arizona waits that long to do their trade.
Yeah, I think Jeremiah on Move the Stick said that he's expecting it to happen like soon or with a week out, but like again, like I am not sold on Bryce. Like my confidence level in terms of Bryce number 1 is not minus 300. Like I would like I think it can be Stroud still. Like I'm not, and that isn't like a bias, which I'd be lying if I said I didn't hedge some liability of Stroud, which it's easier to hedge liability at plus 650. But all of this, like these ripple effects don't come into play if it's Stroud, Bryce, etc. So there's no certainty, and it is chaos, and chaos is great. Makes it fun. There's a new report every day. Yeah,
and some of the mocks are really starting to tighten up at this point too. Like you said, we have Norris's later today. That one I think is important, especially being the 13th of April. But yeah, if it does just go quarterback Anderson, a lot of the chaos might not happen until you get like 8 through 12. There could be some wildness happening. So you can speak a little bit to that Eagles number, the offensive lineman stuff. I think there's almost some value being posed now. Eagles take like a defensive lineman because offensive linemen get steamed enough where there might be actually value on the other side where if somebody drops, the Eagles could absolutely still draft someone on the defensive side of the ball. It's one of those things where sometimes you just have to grab a guy if he's there because he dropped a spot or two.
Yeah.
And you talk about, somebody brought up the uncertainty in the chat. Like, I'm trying to think of where we were, and there's just no way because my brain is like 80%, just like NFL stats and bong resin at this point. But like the Baker Mayfield year, I'm pretty sure 2 weeks out, we were not thinking Baker Mayfield was going first overall yet. I think that was like a day or two before the draft even started. And it feels like kind of what we're spinning towards here, where if we got like some crazy curveball in like 5 days where it's Levis is going first overall, I wouldn't even surprise me at this point because it feels like we haven't got actual good intel on anything yet. Davis is I'm pretty sure we might have woke up that day not knowing Baker was going first yet. That's probably right, Christopher. It was fucking late.
I mean, I think that was like the first year you could start betting on the draft. At least it was my first. I feel like I would have seen it prior, but I went to the NFL draft, the Reggie Bush to Davion Clowney year with like literally like my mom. I don't know if I brought this up before, and we were waiting in line outside of Radio City Hall before we had the days of cell phones, and Jadeveon Clowney, however the news broke, which was the night up before, trickled out that he was going to go one over Reggie Bush. Reggie Bush, which if there were betting odds on the draft way back then, Jadeveon definitely would have had huge odds. Which this is the stuff that notifications are great for, where like betting into Lions corner and Falcons D line, having these notifications on made it great. And I guess value where it was at plus money. Now it's minus 250.
I keep letting him say Clowney, Dan. Mario Williams. You know what you're talking about. You just kept saying Clowney though. I remember that too because that was pretty late. Yeah, Dan, it was the day before. And that was one of those, like, it was early enough and maybe I was just naive enough about football where it's like, no, because we'd all spent the whole fall watching Reggie Bush do ridiculous shit. And it was before, like, we had prospect hype Twitter and all this. And, like defensive players weren't like super sexy like they can be now. It's like, why would you not take I remember being mad about it. Like
it probably would have came out if like Twitter existed.
Yeah.
Like if Twitter existed then and the day of the iPhone was a thing, like it probably would have come out. But yeah, I mean, it was draft is the best. Like anyone complaining about the uncertainty right now, like take a lap. Like this is what it's all about. It makes.
And I think with your over-unders, Luke, I think the uncertainty is what drives some of the value. Certainly when you're betting into, especially when you're betting into overs on draft position. It's like there's a long tail to guys falling. It feels like 90% of the stuff where it's like, oh my God, this guy got drafted way too early. All those guys that get drafted way too early, they don't have prices on them. Like we weren't betting over-unders on Cole Strange. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. The Chattanooga, the Patriots lineman that they took.
The year before we might have, when Circa came out with like the 100. That was fantastic.
We had a Circa trader on the deep dive that year. We had the guy who did it. He was told, like, pick 100 guys and put over-unders and set the limit at 1,000 and, take them down. He's just like, we started to run out of guys. I should go back and listen to that interview because it was like, they had over-unders on quarterbacks that were projected going like the third round. Like that is difficult to set. Those guys
one that
destroyed. Yeah.
Losing there was one I lost. I forget it. Yeah. Those are the best. And if those came out today, because I don't think I had a grasp on betting the draft like I do like then compared to now, it would be God. I would probably fly to Circa. But I've done the math and all the over-unders that we have right now are like the safe guys. And I don't think they can put out a new over-under without it being like there being uncertainty on him. We have like the top 10 guys, then we have Joey Porter and Zay, which are random. Where there's like a consensus between all the guys, or there's a trade factoring in, or it's a quarterback, where I don't think anyone's left, maybe Skoronski, that there is an uncertainty level that can make it leverageable at all. Like,
but I think I get what you're saying, and it's almost like if they were to put out 3 or 4 more over-unders in the first round, the numbers they would have to put up would be contradictory to what already exists. Because it's like, well, if you think that's true, if this guy is over-under, it's truly 13.5, then it's like these two markets don't match up. If this guy goes over, this guy's going under, and you can just start making, we do that sometimes with these where you're making bets in pairs. Where it's like, if this happens, this is very likely that this guy falls because of the team needs. And like you talked about the Joey Porter one, I feel like the people that do set these, and I should get another odds maker on the show sometime. That was just fun talking to Dylan about it. I feel like some of those guys are just grinding the mocks like you are and saying like, hey, Joey Porter, here's a market we can put up, because it's like everybody has them in this area. It's like there's a few outliers, but everybody has them to like these two teams. This is such an easy one to put up. We'll get, there is the old myth about bookmakers are looking for even action on both sides. It's not always true in a market. It can be true sometimes. And I feel like with some of these, they don't mind it if they got even action on both sides of these and just could let it sit and take action. So like Joey Porter's a perfect one to hang up, because you can put it right where it's at, and you're probably going to get a little tickle on either side.
And like Jalen Carter's, which of course we're about to get into Jalen Carter with Staton, but like his was 7.5 yesterday. And I was surprised that this morning it was 6.5. Like I was almost shocked. Which clearly someone bet the under, which the ripple effect for that to me, I think there's 2 scenarios, and this is like galaxy braining it, but it very well could have to do with if Anderson goes 2, it pulls everyone down. So guys like Tyree, Jalen are probably going to go a slot earlier than what we project if it was quarterback, etc. Or it could be something like Anderson going 2. It basically relates with Anderson going 2, because if Anderson goes 2, and let's say the Colts, which I would assume they would be the favorite to swap with the Cardinals for Stroud, and then not too long ago, a month or 2 ago, Jalen Carter was the chalk mock draft pick for the Cardinals. That could be a spot that he goes where 6.5 would be a crazy line. But it was kind of a dead number at 7.5, given that the Raiders, even though they have him in for a meeting right now, I don't think the Lions are out of the question just because they traded Okudah. Like, they signed enough guys to make it like a fair argument to take a corner at D-line still. Like, corner should definitely be favored, but 6.5 minus 115 both sides. That was probably the most interesting move. Levis came to 6.5, which I guess the Raiders were a key number if you believe that they were going to take a QB. What else moved? I think it was a
talk about the corner, because Patrick brings up the terrible Gonzalez number in DK yesterday. Ryan's asking what's up with the Witherspoon smoke. I still like Gonzo first cornerback. There's been not only the Gonzalez versus Witherspoon, the Gonzalez over under, but just like we finally had our first, it's not a true free agency move. It was a trade. But we finally had our first, like, a player went to a team and absolutely supplanted what their supposed pick position was going to be. Like, the Falcons were very much in the mix to be the team who takes the first or second cornerback at that point. And then they trade with Detroit, who is, again, it lowered, obviously greatly lowered the value of taking a cornerback for the Falcons at that point, but at the same time raised it up for the Lions. Like, I don't know if you'll see them. Do you think, will there be a mock that you take seriously between now and the draft that has the Lions not taking a corner? I mean, there might be 1 or 2, but I feel like it's going to be 90-10.
Which I think I saw in your Discord, the Gonzalez bet, which I was looking at it yesterday too. But like in principle, I just couldn't because I missed out on 6.5. But Like the mocks are very much progressing. Gonzalez is falling. Like if you look on my sheet or whatever, like he's getting into the 10 range like consistently. But again, for that overhitting, you have to have Witherspoon go first, assuming that the Lions go corner, where the Lions trading Okudah, and if they do go corner, that kind of drags Gonzalez down a little. Where if you put that Witherspoon first, and if you think the Raiders are taking a corner, Gonzalez would be second. Where if before the trade, it was up in the air, Lions could have gone D-line, and then all of a sudden Witherspoon's the first corner to the Raiders the very next spot and pushes Gonzalez up. So the earlier that Witherspoon goes, the earlier you would assume Gonzalez goes. I'm a believer of Witherspoon going first, but I think it's very similar to like Mayer and Kincaid. Like they're close enough that there can be an argument for either. I think on Brugler's podcast yesterday with like the mock draft with Zerline, Brugler put Gonzalez to the Lions still after this trade. And he just defaulted to his big board. He's like, I think corner is extremely likely right here. And I'm just going to default to my rankings and take Gonzalez because I have him up ahead. So that could be the case.
As difficult as it is to incorporate a young defensive back properly, I wonder too, over the last few years, seeing it happen a few times. I mean, if it weren't for Sauce, we'd be talking about Stingley a lot more. We'd be talking about the two corners in Kansas City, the two corners in Seattle. Like there was essentially like 5 or 6 really good young defensive backs. That has been like a difficulty for teams over a long time, honestly, where it's like it's been tricky to get some of these highly drafted cornerbacks to play well right off the bat. And the fact that we're starting to see teams figuring out how to do that, like it just raises the positional value of a cornerback. And you're seeing that. What's the over under for the first round on corners? Like 5.5 at this point. It's a 4.5.
I think it's 4.5. Well, like it's like juiced to heavily
juiced to the bejesus belt. Yeah. Oh, and I mean, get it. But for what is the Gonzo number right now for over under with the juice?
8.5. So it's like the
juice?
Raiders. Oh, okay. It's the unders. I think like 150.
So,
or no, I think the over is 150 now.
Okay. So there's two scenarios where obviously I do think Witherspoon goes first. That's my belief right now. I don't have anything outside of just the overall feeling of what we've gotten from people I trust. But if he does go first, and the Lions, skipping out on a corner is still a likelihood that can happen. The Raiders obviously have like 6 different positions they can go at this point. So like still at 8.5. I don't know if minus 150 works for me, but it's close. I'm very close. Like I think that's almost a bettable number because there's a lot of scenarios where you get to 8 and you're like, well, it can't be Gonzo and that's it. And at that point, Witherspoon could be on the board at 8.
Yeah, like the scenarios of it, like the over losing, which I like the over, but it would be Lions not going corner, or excuse me, the over losing is Witherspoon and then the Raiders take corner, or the Cardinals trading back with a team like the Raiders at 7. And then because Gonzalez to the Cardinals is a very trendy pick.
I've seen that too.
You would assume that the Cardinals could just take Gonzalez at 7. But yeah, the Gonzalez under would be against everything that we've been reading. Jeremiah has Witherspoon. I would rather just lay it with Witherspoon before Gonzalez. Yeah, probably. But
Stankman, it's a hell of a name, says over 5.5 offensive linemen is free cheese. I don't understand what the cheese is. I like cheese. It's good, but feels that way. I've bet into those markets quite a bit. I feel like in general, offensive lineman hits about 3 out of 4 years, even if it's heavily juiced to the over. We always see a nice little run towards the second half, especially in the 20s, where it's like everybody always needs help. Everybody's always looking for their next big tackle, a swing tackle, a tackle they can move to guard, a guard they can move to center, a center that can play 3 positions. Like there's so many guys that are in that 20 to 35 range too. I'm kind of with you there, Stank brother. Like and it's 5.5 feels actually a little low depending on the juice.
And with these or like team to first draft position, specifically for this year, I think they can be leveraged because as it's assumed that this class is weaker, the drop off in terms of like quality of these players is going to get thin, where there isn't going to be a consensus on best player available when we get into like the late 20s, which I do think team need towards the late first is going to come into play a lot more compared to years past, just based off of the strength, which like the Chiefs are tackle, Bills potentially. I've seen like Cowboys. There was something in your Discord about the Cowboys that was like a great point. Cowboys, who knows? But you're basically betting on, I think not do the math, but DeJuan, Anton, assuming Osiris goes, and then maybe Avila. I think you need one of those 3. So Anton, DeJuan, and Avila. I think you just need one of those 3.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where we get to like 12 or 13, you're 3 deep already, and there's like 2 guys that are not making it to 25. And at that point, you're just, hey, there's probably like 6 guys that are legitimately, this guy maybe only has a 20% chance to be a first rounder, but his name is in the mix. And like you said, Avila, I have that a pretty decent likelihood. If the Chiefs don't draft at the 31st spot, 32nd spot, however you want to call it. I don't want to piss you off. I know you're real anal about the forfeited pick and how we're calling it. But if the Chiefs do trade out, which is something that's been floated around and just something that happens, those 30, 31, 32, those get traded a lot because people like to sneak back in the first round, find something they wanted that first day, get that extra year eligibility, extra year of team control. And there's that's a spot where the Chiefs are so likely to take another, some depth tackle, even though they did sign someone. Like that hurts it a little, but at the same spot, there's so many people from like 20 to 31 that could take offensive linemen.
Yeah, especially because like the first pick of the second round is the Steelers, which you'd assume an offensive lineman is going to be one of the favorites for the Steelers, which would make a case for someone trading in for that as well.
And yeah, it says, imagine cashing this with the Cole Strange situation. It's always the offensive lineman that cashes this is always someone where it's like, oh, really? Like the one year, the guy who put offensive lineman over was Cesar Ruiz, the center from Michigan, going to the Saints, where I don't think that was a very popular mocked pick. I mean, he was one of those guys. It's like, hey, this guy's like 25 to 40. He's falling in that spot, but it was like, oh, like that's just okay. We'll take it. I guess I win. And like you said, the Patriots taking Cole Strange obviously did wonders for that market again last year. Anything 200 minus 200 or under, I think is probably bettable at that one. And people asking about the Discord.
It's free.
It's free. There might be a link. Here's the issue I had with Discords that I didn't know. I was sharing these links to it, and they would expire after 7 days. I had no idea that was a thing. I had to go into the settings and say, make this never expire. And at that point, the shit worked. So yeah, I think it is the pinned tweet on the @DeepDivePod, like Dan's saying.
It's a deep dive Discord. It's not a 5th year option. And you probably should tell like the draft channel. What's it called? It's like Super Bowl props, I think.
Yeah. There was the Super Bowl prop channel. And they just have refused to change the name of it. And it's funny, too. It is not actually run by anyone who has anything to do with the deep dive. It was people who, like you guys in the chat, would have conversations with yourselves. And then somebody's like, well, this sucks because as soon as the show's over, we can't talk in the chat anymore. And somebody says, well, I'm starting a Discord. So it's just like YouTube chat people running it, which is awesome because I have no responsibility, no culpability. And for sure, it's fun. There's some very good conversations in there now that there's a lot of people. It's a great time.
So
yeah,
do we know when?
You do have to do a little work to get in there.
Do we know when Mr. Staton's going to be here or what?
Should be. I mean, we said 4 Eastern.
I'm saying like I haven't done one of these before. Like, is there like I don't know if he's here yet. Like,
he literally just appeared. You want to introduce him and bring him in?
The MVP. Yeah.
I can't believe you were complaining like 3
seconds
before he popped. Rob,
you're the host.
Hey, how's it going, guys? You okay?
What's going on?
excited to talk some a little sea chickens, a little everything else, and 14 days out now.
You have been I think you've probably come up in every single episode that we've had, which we've been doing these draft episodes since January, which your Jalen Carter take is a very popular one. Your blogs are fantastic. I've been interested in betting a Jalen Carter under, I want to say for months, and your blogs are the only reason I have not. But
oh dear.
So no pressure. But in terms of like the chaos right now, which I think this is like peak chaos, are you buying any rumors more than others? Like Anderson, like the Texans actually passing on Stroud if he doesn't go 1, or are you buying Bryce going 2, like 1 as well? Like what are you buying and are you just waiting on?
So what I am buying is when someone like Chris Mortensen comes out and says Bryce Young's going to be the first overall pick, I'm buying that. When Chris Mortensen says in the same interview that Will Levis ain't getting out the top 5, I know that that's not a very popular take, but I'm listening to that. Why is somebody like Chris Mortensen saying that someone like Will Levis is not going to get out the top 5? And that for me makes it seem like the Colts may well have just made a decision that we want this guy. We think this guy can start quickly. We're going to bring him in and we're going to just go with that. So those are the two things that I'm focusing on. Then when Lance Zierlein says there's a chance that the Texans are not going to go quarterback at 2, I'm listening to that because he nailed both their mock draft picks a year ago. He's obviously in Houston. He is seemingly well connected with that franchise, either because he has sources or because he just gets that team. So I am paying a bit of attention to that. I was going to publish a mock draft today, and I was all set to put CJ Stroud at number 2. And then last night I was thinking, hang on, I need to I give myself a bit more time with this because I want to make sure that I'm comfortable with just continuing with that idea that the Texans are going to go QB at number 2. There's been a bit of speculation. Michael Lombardi's been talking about Stroud's not the most coachable guy. The trendy thing at the minute is to talk about, I can't remember what it's called, but it's this S2. Test, isn't it?
S2, yeah. It's not Wonderlic is gone, and S2 is coming hard. And it's funny too, when I'm doing my next mock, like I've started so many mocks now that I've realized like I need to put a spot on my calendar, do not disturb, no meetings, no bothers. I have to have like 4 hours, and I have to just do. You can't stop and pick it up the next day because something has happened. I'm like, next one I do, it has to be full focus, do it right now because shit happened. Like our producer Dan, he wrote a 7 round mock for the Falcons. Like I don't know, 6 minutes before the trade, he was finished something horrible like that. Like, oh well, this is garbage now, so that's fun. But and real quick too, we got so worked up about asking you questions. We don't have forever, but introduce yourself, tell people about the blog real quick.
Okay, well, I've done Seahawks Draft blog since 2008, so it's been a long thing. It's been a long-running thing. Kind of like acts as like a second full-time job. So I work for the BBC in the UK, and radio host and do a bit of TV and stuff like that. But I used to live in Vancouver, so I kind of adopted the Seahawks and I lived in Vancouver. And then since coming back to the UK, I've never missed a game. I try and get to Seattle every year. The only time I wasn't able to do that was kind of COVID. So yeah, and it's become a bigger thing than I ever expected it to be. But it's kind of taken on like a YouTube channel now, and the blog's crazy busy, and it's a lot of fun. I also think I don't know what other fan bases are like, but the Seahawks fans are they love to fight each other, kind of feisty.
I was just gonna say the NFL just so immensely popular, obviously, and every fan base is so good. But it does feel like the Seattle one has like a pretty raucous fan base, just kind of based on the fact that they don't have a lot of other pro teams up there anymore. Like it's their only thing now. So
Can I just give you an example, though? So what generally happens is the Seahawks fan base splits itself into two teams on every single subject. So you either love the Jamal Adams trade or you hate the Jamal Adams trade. You either want to fire Pete Carroll or you think Pete Carroll is the greatest thing that has ever existed. And the current thing is drafting a quarterback at 5, or that is the stupidest idea in the world ever. And you can't be in the middle. You can't be D-line. I'm uncomfortable with a D-line or a QB. It has to be, no, you have to pick a team. Who is it going to be? And then not only do you have to pick a team, you have to then go on Twitter and argue with everybody. So that's kind of how it is at the moment. It's kind of made this process unenjoyable for me. I think it's been more arguments than kind of, hey, they've got 5 and 20 and 37 and 52. This is great. Yeah. It's been like a massive argument for 6 months instead.
Now, which side are you on? I mean, just as not so much as an analyst, like as a fan, because Seattle had a very successful draft last year, and they got way more out of the quarterback position than they ever thought. Like, if you would have, this is not where I thought the Seattle Seahawks would be, 12 months ago.
Well, I'm not going to be disappointed if they take Will Anderson at number 5. So I'm going to be quite comfortable with that and just sort of enjoy the heck out of it. There's part of me that think, look, Geno Smith had a great first half of last season, and then a pretty average / quite bad at times second half of the season. He is still Geno Smith. I think the way the team has structured his contract is indicative of we're going to give this another year. And here's the thing: like, if Geno Smith has an average season next season, are they going to want to pay him $32.4 million or whatever the contract is for next year? So they're going to have a big decision to make at the end of this season either way. And they might have to make a very difficult decision, even if he's pretty good. If he's like the 15th best quarterback in the league, they then have to determine how much they want to pay for that. So there's a big decision coming there. I just like the idea of, I think with 20 and 37 and 52, you can still improve your defense. And I've always been a guy that says, I will happily take a shot on a quarterback. I know that the complaints about some of these players and the accuracy issues with Richardson, for example, or the interceptions with Will Levis, or whatever it is that you want to get into. For me, it's kind of like, if you take a shot on Richardson and he bombs, that's fine. You just move on to the next. You go again. I don't have an issue with that. But if you hit the quarterback and you get Josh Allen or you get Patrick Mahomes, you're a contender every year. So I'm buying raffle tickets until I get the guy. And I'm not just going to assume that 33-year-old Geno Smith is the guy. I'm going to keep taking those raffle tickets. I want to get an elite quarterback. And if they take Richardson and he busts, who gives a crap? Like, you go and get another one in a few years' time. I'm not really that bothered about that. So I'm okay with definitely with the quarterback, and I'm okay if they decide to take Will Anderson instead. And
so your mock, you're penciling in Anderson at 2?
To Seattle.
No, if like your mock that you're coming out with today, do you have Anderson too? You don't have to bear though. You don't even have to. Let's just say
it's. I think I spoke to somebody who is very well connected and is a big name within the NFL, and he said that Will Anderson will hands down be the first defensive player taken, in his opinion. So when I see all this Tyree Wilson stuff, it kind of makes me think, is that really what the league thinks? Or is there just maybe a handful of teams that this guy I've spoken to prefer Tyree Wilson? And that could certainly be the case. But for me, I think Will Anderson, just because of the production and the character, and he's very explosive, I think that will mean that he goes ahead of Tyree Wilson. Plus, there's the injury aspect with Tyree Wilson. That's still lingering there. I think it's going to be pretty hard for Houston to turn around to their weary fans and go, we've got Tyree Wilson, second overall. That just
right. And that's where I wonder if some of these reports are true, but completely taken out of context, where it's like two things can be true. It's like, hey, maybe Ryans and maybe the whole front office in Houston likes Tyree Wilson better than Will Anderson. But also could be true is, we're not taking a defensive player second overall. There's quarterbacks. We need a quarterback. Like, we can like Tyree Wilson all we want. And if we had the third pick as well, maybe we'd take him. But like that, that can be true that they have those flip-flop, but there's no chance in hell they're not taking a quarterback if someone's available.
Can I just throw something really weird out there as well? And listen, people are going to hate this, and I get it. I'm going to say this, and people will, I know there's plenty of Seahawks fans who will just call me an idiot for saying this. I don't think it's that preposterous that if CJ Stroud has had a bad S2 or they need a better name than S2. It needs a cool day. Like Wonderlic at least is an interesting word. They need a word. If Stroud's had a bad S2 and if Michael Lombardi's right and he's not very coachable or whatever the complaint is there, or if there's concerns about how that he looks to the sideline, they tell him what the read is and he has to go and execute it. I understand why that's an issue. I'm just saying, like, they are running the Niners offense, and it's very similar to the Sean McVay offense. And when Will Levis was playing for Liam Cohen in Kentucky in 2021, he looked really good. Now, if you'd have said a few years ago, Mitch Trubisky, the Bears are going to trade up to number 2 and take Mitch Trubisky, people are going, why? Why are they going to do that? That's stupid. But they've signed Mike Glennon. They're not going to do any of those things, and they still did it. So. And apparently Levis is somebody who's tested very well. Apparently got a 93 in the S2. So he was second behind Bryce Young in terms of the big name quarterbacks. I think Jake Hayner was like higher than Levis, but Levis was number 2. Like, is it beyond the realms of possibility that they just go, do you know what? We'll take this guy because we think he can start quickly. He knows the offense. He's probably got some of the language down. He's got a big arm. I know people like hammered Levis because he goes to the gym or something, but I just wouldn't completely rule something weird like that happening now, especially when Chris Morton's saying this guy's going to go in the top 5. So it could be Indianapolis, but who's to say someone doesn't trade up to number 3 for him? Who's to say the Texans don't pull off a huge stunner and take Levis to number 2? I think it's pretty fluid in that regard. And you're right. They have got to go to their fans and give them some excitement and some hope. And how are you going to do that if you're trotting out Davis Mills again next year?
Cannot agree more. Which, like Zerline's mock, which was crazy and has become less crazy, which I think the only reason Tyree is in the discussion is because he put Tyree at number 2 in his mock. But he also had the Texans trading back up to take Levis at 7, which would be in his assumed range not too long ago. But like Stroud, to me, like if Stroud makes it to 3, like it just feels like it makes so much more sense for who we think Stroud is a Colts guy, for the Colts to trade, just swap with the cards. But my question is, is there a scenario that you can see the Seahawks taking Jalen? And then is there ever a point, or are you just trusting your process where like you see like Jeremiah, Brugler, like Mortensen, just putting Jalen to the Seahawks? Is there a point where like, okay, maybe this is actually going to happen? Or do you just trust your sources and your process enough that you're just going to stand by it's not going to be Jalen at 5?
I know a lot of the stuff that is around Jalen Carter. I know a lot of the character stuff. I've not sort of been actively speaking about it because a lot of people are kind of reporting to some of the stuff now. I just don't think it's appropriate to go into great detail on some of the issues here. But look, it's quite a lot. Please bear. I'll just have to run through it sort of step by step.
Please.
John Schneider and Pete Carroll have come out in numerous interviews, and they're not just saying, we like character guys, which every team says. What they're saying is we completely changed everything we did in 2022. And the focal point of our decision-making with that draft was to take good character players, was to take players who are going to come in, who are going to work their asses off, and they're going to really work to be the top pros. And that was the best draft that they've had in like 8 or 9 years. And it really worked from that approach. They were speaking just recently, I think, at the Combine. Pete Carroll was saying, we got these rookies in. We'd made character such a big thing. And they all came in and they worked so hard. They came into training camp in shape, because what you have is the mini camp. And then the players basically are left to their own devices for a few weeks, few months. And there's been issues with that in Seattle. Malik McDowell got himself in an AV accident during that period between mini camp and and he never played it down for the Seahawks. So the guys stayed in shape. They came into camp and they were ready to go. And this was all part of the success of that 2022 draft class. So when you're speaking in those terms and saying that we've had the best draft ever and it was all about character and all of this, it just seems really strange for me that they would then a year later go, well, we said all that, but now we're going to take the biggest character risk that we've known about in a long, long time with the 5th overall pick. It just seems somewhat unlikely. And people, I think when you're referencing, the big names in the national media and they're going, hey, we're going to put like Daniel Jeremiah and Dane Brugler and people like this, they're going to put, what does everybody say in their little blurb? with the pick. They always go, Pete Carroll loves these kind of guys. He'll take a chance on these kind of guys. They always say that, but they don't. It's not that it's not true. It's just that Pete Carroll also likes guys who love football. Like when they took a chance on, Marshawn Lynch, for example. It's not that Lynch didn't love. It's just that he's very difficult to manage. But when you put him out in the field, you are going to get every sinew of Marshawn Lynch on that field. It was the same with Percy Harvin. They're going to put everything out there. The gambles that they've taken. People say, well, they took a chance on Frank Clark. You could never deny Frank Clark's football character. It was the fact that he'd been involved in a very serious incident, which a lot of teams were concerned about, and rightly so, because it was an alleged domestic violence incident. But in terms of football character, there was grit, there was determination, and he played with his hair on fire on the field. I'm sorry, but you can't watch that Ohio State game and go, that is a guy that is capable of doing that. Jalen Carter basically did what he wanted at Georgia. He may turn up for a practice. He may give effort on these are what we've heard from Todd McShay, that he doesn't take well to coaching. His football character is not great. This is not somebody. Pete Carroll's always compete is his favorite catchphrase. You can't be sort of picking and choosing when you're going to lift,
Right.
It's a job now. Like you're a professional at this point. Once your name is said by Goodell, and we'll assume it's Goodell. We'll assume he's not falling that far, and he's getting some random person announcing him on day 2. But and what you spoke about too with the 2022 draft, like if they make this commitment and they have middling results, or God forsake, poor results, it's one thing, but the confirmation bias that comes with here's what we're going to do, and then seeing it work out so well, like the odd, I'm kind of with you on that. The odds of them just flipping, going a full 180 on that, going completely against what worked so well last year it does seem unlikely, which, I mean, I want to see him play at his best. Hopefully he lands somewhere that just has a coach that scares the hell out of him and gets him to come to the gym every day and gets him, because he's a freak. Like he's going to play well in somebody's defense if he lands in the right spot. But I'm with you. It seems like he drops. And my theory has always been like the further you get away from the police reports and the having to go back to Georgia during the combine, everybody's memory is so short these days. The further we get away from that, because I mean, people the next day, Luke, how far did we have him down in mocks like that week? Like people were mocking him in the 20s. Like, come on, like this is a little silly. Like,
but teams are going to do their own homework. We've all forgotten about it. Teams know everything. Whatever they need to know about that incident now, they probably know it.
Oh yeah.
And these meetings, these official meetings, they're probably asking him about it, and they want to know what his side of the story is. But they probably know what the real side of the story is because they've got the private investigators and whatever they use to find out what's going on there. But it's the legal issues. It's why was your conditioning so bad against LSU and Ohio State? And we need you to play 75% of the snaps for 17 games in a regular season. We don't want you paying 33. Mississippi State and then looking gassed against Ohio State in the biggest game of the season. We need you out there week after week. And this is the other thing that we've got to remember here. With like people act like Jalen Carter, he could come to Seattle and all of a sudden he's playing like 80% of the snaps and being a game wrecker. He's never shown that at Georgia. He's always been a low snap player. And it may take him 2 or 3 years to get his conditioning right, let alone everything else. And like Quinton Williams, he could be a player that takes a bit of time to sort of reach his best. And if that's the case with Jalen Carter, people assume he's like an impact player, but he might take 2 or 3 years. How's that any different to Anthony Richardson, who might have to sit for a couple of years and then redshirt him? Okay, Richardson's not out in the field, Carter can be, but if he's out there for 25, 30% of the snaps like he was, last year at Georgia, not the most recent season, even then he wasn't playing the bulk of the snaps. There's just a lot there. And I don't think the Seahawks will take him. I think that the team that takes him is going to have a GM who is in an incredibly secure position and can survive this not working, essentially. And that, to me, it's Howie Roseman.
I was going to say I mocked him to the Eagles, and you said like Roseman is a secure guy, and you talk about how he is just kind of a situational, rotational player. Like, boy, does that fit in with what the Eagles have done? And it would be a coup for them, I think, at that point. But yes. I mean, Luke, where do you have him right now, kind of in your big board mocks as far as his most likely positioning?
So it has to adjust because of that Lions trade, but it was like the 6 like 6 to 10. Like he's not going to fall out of 10.
Yeah.
My next question was like, for the pick 20, how much weight is pick 20 going to change based? Like if they take a D line, like if they take Tyree, let's just say at 5, where the common mock for the Seahawks set 20 as a wide receiver. Could they double down on D line? If they take a QB, do you see wide receiver being more likely or D line being more likely? Like, what's like the matrix with pick 20 based off of what happens at 5?
So I'm led to believe, and I've not had this sort of verified. This is what someone has mentioned to me, and I think it's true, is that the Seahawks kind of run a system. I think they run it in Green Bay as well. So essentially, you kind of have a system whereby your plan is kind of almost like it's sort of put into a system, and then once you pick a certain player first, the system will tell you this is the plan that you've laid out. So you pivot to a certain plan depending on who you take in each state to make sure that you get the kind of, you fill the needs, you address the kind of areas that you need to address, and you know when you're getting onto the clock who you're going to take. So the Seahawks will have this mapped out. So if they take a defensive lineman at number 5, I don't know. It depends how much they view like Hendon Hooker. Like a lot of teams think Hendon Hooker is a good player. If they're determined to take a quarterback, then they might take Hooker 20 or 37, or they might move back into the end of the first round or whatever. But if they don't think Hendon Hooker's worth taking in that range, then they'll have different positions. What I think they will do is I think they will know what they're going to do at number 5 already, and I think 20 will be flexible, and it will be a best player available pick, and that could be one of a number of things. I know like receivers are trendy pick for the Seahawks at number 20. I'm not totally sold on that just because I think receivers are a little bit overrated. So I think it could be one of a number of different things. Like let's say Michael Mayer's there at 20. I don't think it's out of the question that the Seahawks would take him because Noah Fant's out of contract. Kobe Parkinson's out of contract next year. Will Disley's got major injury issues throughout his career and might not be here next year. They might not have a tight end contracted for next year. So sort of investing in one this year, and it doesn't have to be Mayer, it could be one of the other, top tight ends. Wouldn't completely rule that out. If Bijan Robinson lasts to 20, Pete Carroll, running back, very talented player, they might just say best player available. When they took Ken Walker a year ago, a lot of Seahawks fans were screaming at the TV, saying, "What are you doing taking a running back here?" But they thought the value was too good, and they wanted to take it. So it depends on the value. I could see them going D-line, and just sort of doubling down on that. I think there's a lot of options for that 20. I think they're going to go best player available. Just one quick point. You said, is there a scenario where the Seahawks could take Jalen Carter number 5? There is one scenario. I never had a chance to answer that. There's one scenario where I think it's possible, and that's just that first of all, they don't like the quarterbacks and are just completely opposed to taking one at number 5, which I'm not buying that. I think they're intrigued by them, whether they take them or not. And then the other thing is just that they think this is a crap draft. And I think a lot of people do sort of look at that and go, do you know what? There's not those legit blue chip players. We've got to try and get a major impact out of this number 5 pick. And he's just the most talented player in this draft class. So we're going to take a chance. But I think the Seahawks would be more inclined to do that if they hadn't had the Malik McDowell experience and if they hadn't made mistakes in the past, which have come back to bite them.
Yeah, which these issues for any other player would send him out of the first round, which kind of speaks to like how much of a freak I guess he is being spoken as top 5 still. And
you talk about the other, you rattle them off great because you talk about the Seahawks so much. I can't do what, the Seahawks have picked 20, 30, whatever, 57, all that. Like, a lot of teams have decent war chests like that. And, we're talking about how does the 5th pick affect the 20th? And, it feels like a lot of these teams, the inverse is true too, when you're looking at how does this team treat. I think you can learn a little bit about how a team would treat a top 5, 10, 15 pick based on what they've done with day 2 and what they have for day 2, because there are teams like, hey, this team, when they need a 3rd wide receiver and they have a mid-round pick, they're still taking the best corner because they need that too. And then they're just taking 3 wide receivers on day 2, snagging another one in the 6th, bringing in an undrafted free agent, seeing like, hey, we got 5 guys. One of these guys has to work out, right? Mm-hmm. There are teams that's just like, this is a position we're willing to, spend capital on day 2 rather than day 1. So I think and I think sometimes that affects how they, how they're going to use their day 1, top end capital at that point. And, it does depend on what kind of war chest you have and what you've traded away, what you've acquired during the last few years.
I mean, with 20, just to say, in every mock draft that I don't know how many I'll do between now and 2 weeks, probably 2 or 3. In every single one, for that
More
pick
the
number
better.
20. Well, every single time that I do one between now and the end of and the draft, spoiler alert to anybody who follows the mocks who can care what mock I put out. But I'm going to have them trading down from 20 every single time into the mid-20s and taking John Michael Schmitz. They are going to. I think they need a center. They need to invest. They know they need to invest in a center. John Michael Schmitz is the ideal scheme fit for them, as well as Luke Weipler, the center at Ohio State. So if they can't get to Schmitz in the late first, then I think they will pivot to Luke Weipler in round 2. But I am going to put John Michael Schmitz with the Seahawks with their second first-round pick in for the rest of the mocks that I do, whether they go quarterback or defensive line. I think if Will Anderson's there at 5, I think they're going to take him, and that's that. So I think Will Anderson first, John Michael Schmitz second is a fair prediction for what I think the Seahawks are going to end up with.
They'd be trading back, right? Like later first?
Oh, yeah. 25, 26, somewhere in there.
That's it. Yeah, I think so the great thing is because the Seahawks are sat in front of LA and Baltimore and
Tampa.
Teams like
in front. Sorry.
No. So like you've got the Chargers, haven't you? You've got Ravens next. And if the receivers haven't got, let's say Jackson Smith and Jigba's still there, or if you think that Jordan Addison's the first receiver, or whatever you're thinking.
Yeah.
If you want to make sure that you get that guy, if you're like the Giants, for example, move up to Seattle's spot and go and take him. And then you're not risking the Chargers or the Ravens taking him, and then you can move down into the mid first. So I think it's a good position for the Seahawks to be in terms of the receivers. If they don't come off the board at 20, it means they could move down to 24, 25, 26, and then go and take John Michael Schmitz. I think that's a reasonable prediction for the Seahawks.
You know I like that, Luke, because I think all my mocks have Schmitz in the first. I've been waiting for a betting market on Schmitz to come at like over, 33, 35, something like that. I bet him into the first. I don't have my Gophers hat here either. I should have had my Minnesota Gophers hat on today.
And my last question. So Will Anderson's off the board. Tyree or Anthony Richardson?
Anthony Richardson. I mean, that's if you're asking me, Anthony Richardson.
Got it.
I mean, for them,
of course.
But how do you feel that the Seattle? Because you talk about Howie Roseman is like maybe the model for, hey, I've won a Super. It's like we've been there. I'm comfortable. I'm not on a hot seat because it's like the Bears in the past couple of years. Like they had to do some stupid shit because they're like, oh my God, this has to work now, or we don't have jobs. Like everyone's at a different spot in their hot seat, whatever you want to call it, their career. Some guys are just, I'm drafting or making moves just to get me one more year of employment, hopefully. And not everyone's in that spot. How do you think the Seattle front office is viewing, something like that? Because there are teams that be like, I need to take a risk on a super high side guy like this. Because if we hit it, like you said, you could have a Mahomes or you could have we got a quarterback that was good enough. We'll try again next year.
So Pete Carroll and John Schneider could do whatever the hell they want. They've basically got the keys to the franchise, and Jody Allen is the sort of the owner, and there's the Vulcan group, which was Paul Allen's group, who own the team, but it's going to get sold probably within the next 2-3 years, and they're in a very secure position right now, and I just think they'll be able to do whatever they fancy. I think the problem with Tyree Wilson is he's 271 pounds, and the Seahawks have switched to a 3-4. So, as a 271-pound outside linebacker, Alden Smith did it, but Alden Smith there's not many of them. So can you play him outside linebacker? I don't think he shows enough of a speed rush off the edge to think he can play there, but he's 271 pounds, not 281 pounds. So is he a 3-4 defensive end? I'm not sure. For me, he looks like a classic power end in a 4-3. So
that's a prime spot for Tennessee to trade up, and then you take someone out like Nolan Smith at 11 instead of Richardson. Because if guys fall, that's like a prime spot. If Stroud gets pushed back, Levis or Richardson could be there, and someone's going to want to come up.
And I think part of the problem that a lot of the mock drafts get into is they almost see the Seattle's defensive need as coming down to number 5, and so they'll go to number 5 and they'll force it a little bit. It's Carter, it's Tyree Wilson, it is Will Anderson, and then they have to go and put a receiver at number 20. You see that in so many mocks. But the thing is, well, what if you took Anthony Richardson at 5 and then you take Will McDonald, or one of these, like Kalijah Kancey or somebody, in the top 40, or Whoever there are Derek Hall. There are other players. You mentioned Nolan Smith. It doesn't mean if you take a quarterback at 5, it doesn't mean that you can't then you're banned from like drafting other defensive players. You can get defensive impact players in with so many picks. You have 20, you have 37, you have 53, you have 83. So you've got 5 picks in the first 3 rounds to go and address your defense. It doesn't come down to that one pick. So for me, it's Richardson. I don't know about the fit with Tyree Wilson, the injury stuff. He's also, and this is maybe a thing that I care about more than Pete Carroll and John Schneider, but the Seahawks have drafted 2 older Big 12 defenders in the first round in Jordan Brooks and LJ Collier. LJ Collier was a huge bust and has moved on. He's with the Cardinals now. And Jordan Brooks, he's been okay. Like another 23-year-old Big 12 defender. Like, really? That's what you're going to, we're going to come out of this Russell Wilson trade with? Or Anthony Richardson, who is basically DK Metcalf at quarterback. That's the kind of guy that Pete Carroll loves to get his hands on. And John Schneider loves the traits of guys like that. John Schneider freaking loved Josh Allen, by the way. Like, when people were still seeing Josh Allen as a meme at Wyoming, he wanted to trade Russell Wilson and take that guy first overall. So, and that was when Russell Wilson was prime peak Russell Wilson.
It's before he got weird.
Yeah, Richardson reminds you a lot of Josh Allen, and people have got the real revisionist history about what people were saying about. I often reel out this. I don't know if you've ever read the Bob McGinn scouting sources articles over the years. They've been on
waiting for it 10 days.
So, well, I've got them here. He's put them on Go Long. So I've you can read the ones for this year, but I pulled the ones out from when Josh Allen was there. He's been compared to Blake Bortles, and people were saying he's no good. His accuracy's crap. He's erratic. He can't play quarterback. Patrick Mahomes was told he's too reckless. I don't see it. He's a system quarterback. He plays in the spread. It's not going to work out. This is what people were saying. Like Daniel Jeremiah put a top 50 out at the start of April 2017. No Patrick Mahomes in the top 50.
Right.
That's what people were saying about Mahomes before he was drafted. In Jeremiah's final mock draft in 2017, he had Patrick Mahomes in the mid-20s. So people act like those guys were brilliant when they were in college and were highly rated. They weren't. People are saying the same thing about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis and people like that now that they were saying about Josh Allen. Traits matter. It's about how you coach and develop those traits. It's about taking somebody who projects as you're going to need to work on this guy and turning them into something special. That is what Pete Carroll runs a development program. Anthony Richardson's a developmental quarterback. It's the perfect situation. Geno Smith is on board with training somebody. If Will Anderson's there, I think they'll take him. If Will Anderson isn't there, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Anthony Richardson.
Love that.
I one last Seahawks question then from me is, let's say it's Richardson or Anderson. Either one, I think, is you would get a high upside project quarterback with freak athlete traits. And then let's say you get your dream scenario, the Giants, who are definitely in need of a wide receiver. They have their eyes on somebody. They take Addison, trade with you. You trade back, you get Schmitz or another interior offensive lineman that you like. Is there a guy that you have your eye on day 2 to be like, because you need a wide receiver 3. It would be useful. 1, 2 is great.
Oh,
like, I know. I want to see.
Dude, this is the number one Downs fan that exists. Josh Downs. This is the number one Josh Downs.
There's got to be another name because we've seen this for years now. There's been some guys that crush out of the 3rd round. Like every year we have wide receivers that are just like, this guy popped right away. Like, why are we trading up for wide receivers ever?
So I love Josh Downs. He's my wide receiver 1. And he is so mature. Like his uncle's Dre Bly. His dad was in the NFL as a coach. He talks like a 10-year veteran already. He's route running fantastic. Explosive, gets downfield. The way that he's so small that he high points the ball better than some of these 6'2", 6'3" guys.
Reminds you of
fantastic. Yeah, I think he's an incredible player. So I think that he could definitely be on Seattle's radar because he also has a little bit of Tyler Lockett to him, and the way that Tyler Lockett was an incredibly mature player as well. I think his personality is very similar to Lockett. The other guy I really like is Jonathan Mingo. I think so many people, he's my second receiver. There's just so many people are sleeping on him. Just watch how he separated at the Senior Bowl. He's got soft hands. He had that crazy Moss play, during the season. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah. He had the one-handed catch, which is unbelievable. He can do the spectacular things. Lane Kiffin didn't do a good enough job of kind of featuring him. But that's the same with the other Ole Miss receiver that Seattle took a few years ago, who was kind of streaky and had big plays. And the way that Jonathan Mingo blocks, like he loves to block And that's going to really appeal to the Seahawks. So, that Josh Downs and Jonathan Mingo, the two guys there. There's something very interesting to note from the Seahawks as well. We're talking about day 2, is that they have had Byron Young at the Tennessee pass rusher and Yaya Diaby and people like that in for official visits. And I think what they're doing is they're setting up that if Will Anderson isn't there at number 5 and they do take a quarterback, who are some of the edge rushers that we can maybe get in the middle rounds? And people often forget. People say, they've got to take an edge. They've got to take an edge. They took Boya Mafe in round 2. Like, he's the 40th overall pick last year. So they've invested in that. They've signed Uchenna and Nwosu. They've still got Darrell Taylor. It's not that the cupboard is not bare at edge rusher. What they need are these big-bodied defensive tackle, defensive end types. And the Seahawks traditionally have targeted those guys in the middle rounds. Jaron Reed's the highest pick they've ever had on a defensive tackle, and he just re-signed for the team. But it's generally like round 3. So could the Seahawks, are they more likely to sort of look at Byron Young from Alabama in late second, third round type range? Cameron Young at Mississippi State. Are they going to be looking at guys like that? Jacqueline Roy to play nose tackle. Are they going to look at those guys in the middle rounds rather than maybe sort of feeling like they've got to do something really, really quickly? It's possible. So I think there's a lot of options for Seattle.
Love that. And then we're over, so we'll let you go after this. But in terms of like your mock drafts, do you have any, how do I ask this? Actually, I'm not going to ask it. I'm going to ask you off air. That's it.
Just ask it, man.
Everyone listening is bettors. Everyone listening wants the tidbits like you've spoken to this source about Will Anderson going number 1. So if you have any other tidbits, whether it's in your mock or you just want to share now, everyone listening and ourselves would love to hear them. Like, are there any guys you think are going to go into the top 10?
Yeah, closing nugget. I need a nugget.
Yeah, we need nuggets.
Okay, let me do my notes that I've got here. Let's see.
Hell yeah.
Okay. I know one thing. I know that there are teams in the league who are really, really frustrated that like the whole middle tier of the quarterback class just basically returned to school or transferred. I don't know if you've noticed that. There was like about 8 guys who were like going to be at the Senior Bowl or whatever, and like they're not there anymore, and then they're not in this draft. And so basically, the guy that I respect the most, who I speak to, said what you've basically got is 4 guys at the top who he thinks, in his words, are locks to go in the top 10. And he said there's a very good chance that 4 will go in the top 5. That's what he said. I spoke to him about a month ago. I'm going to check him in again before the draft. And then he said Hendon Hooker early round 2, but he said that, and then he qualified that and said, actually, do you know what? He thinks somebody will trade back into the back end of the first round for the, aptly for the 5th-year option, so that's what they're looking for. And he said, because he's going to have to sit out his first year, having that sort of extra year tapped onto the contract is really important. So in my next mock, I'm going to have the Tennessee Titans deciding not to trade up and go and get one of these quarterbacks. And what I've got them doing is trading into Kansas City spot at the end of the first round and getting Hendon Hooker, who's a local hero. So, and he could sit behind Tannehill for a year and they get the 5th-year option on that. So that's one of the things that I've been going for. Will Anderson, the top defender was apparently the thing that he's an alpha A+. He's everything you look for in a player, great family, toughness, verbally excellent with teammates, captain, knows how to speak to the media, all of that. I was told that it's that basically there's a feeling within the league. I've seen this increasingly. People keep saying it's a bad safety class. What I've been told is that actually the league thinks it's a great safety class. There's just not anybody that you would want to take in like the first 25 picks. That when you actually get to rounds 3 and 4, teams are going to fill their boots, that there are big physical safeties at the combine. A lot of those safeties, like the drills where they have to change direction, they did them better than the cornerbacks. So there's a lot of excitement, I'm told, about the safety depth in this. And cornerback is described as solid, not great. Tight end classes, everybody knows about that. And I think there's a good chance that we could see 7 going in the top 65. So yeah, I mean, there's other things that I would not be comfortable sharing, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. When is your next mock?
It really, like, I have just arrived back. Yeah, well, I've just got back from Dubai and I am jet lagged like crazy. So if I can stay awake, I'm going to publish it today. But if not, it'll be tomorrow.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
No, great. Looking forward to it for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Rob.
Yeah.
Everyone listening is the biggest fan. More mock drafts, the better, is what I think everyone wants. But yeah, thank you. It was absolutely phenomenal. I think we got a bunch of bettable tidbits out of this.
No, yeah. appreciate the invite, guys, and happy to jump on anytime.
Yeah, the Twitter handle is just take the space out of his name and put one of those @ symbols in front of it. Real easy. Just
that's it.
Super easy, guys. Rob Staton. So appreciate it. We'll call it a week. We'll be back next week as we are the week before the draft. We'll catch you guys.